Today is an exciting day for us as we welcome the new secretary who has joined us via phone today, as well as a number of new board members. We are excited to be here. In that spirit, I think what we'll do is just start with a quick round of introductions for the board, just so that we can introduce ourselves to the audience and who we are and where we're from. So, Linda, I'll start with you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Linda Sager. I'm a pediatrician. I've worked at UMass Medical School in Worcester for many years. And in 2016, I became the first DCF medical director. And I'm very glad to be here. I have a great interest in the educational opportunities for all our kids. I have to say, especially for children in foster care.
Like, where's Nikki?
She'll be back.
Oh, she's on her way. Sorry. Hi, I'm Maura Siegel. I am a proud mom of 2 living in Newton. I've been involved in my career in primarily in K-12 education, aiming at helping strengthen instruction to serve the most marginalized children, both in Massachusetts and the country. And I've been a proud board member here for about a year and a half.
Great. My name is Paul Belcito. My day job is the executive director of the Irene and George Davis Foundation based in Springfield, Massachusetts. Our foundation has a specific emphasis on early literacy and early education, and so this work and this body of work is really important to me personally because my most important title is dad to a 7-year-old as well, so I'm able to carry that through to my work as well, and grateful to the new board members for your service, for stepping up and welcome you. And I'll leave it, we do have Secretary Tutwiler on the phone. Why don't we hold him for some comments in a little bit, and then we'll move on to the Commissioner.
Great. So I'm Amy Kershaw. I'm the acting commissioner for the department. I've been here since March of last year, and also my most important title is parent of 2 now 18 and 21-year-old who use all forms of early education and care and child care. So family child care, center-based early childhood programs, and amazing out-of-school time and after-school programs at their schools. And I'm very happy to be here and to welcome all the new board members and our new secretary.
Hi, I'm Jamela Lee. I've been on the board for a year and a half. I'm Chief People Officer at Jumpstart for Young Children, which is headquartered here in Boston, but we're in 14 states in the District of Columbia here in the U.S., and we're an early childhood education organization.
My name is Maria Gonzalez Moller, and I am CEO for the community group in Lawrence, a large early education and care agency in that area for the last 50-plus years, and I have been involved with the agencies for about 30 of them. And I have been part of the board for about 5 or 6 months now.
Thank you. My name is Cheryl Travers. I'm new to the board, so very excited to be here. I am a public school preschool teacher in the Lawrence Public Schools. I've been with Lawrence for 25 plus years, and I'm very happy to be here.
And I'm George Tanisov, also a new board member. This is my first board meeting. I'm occupying the business seat on the board. By day, I work for Johnson & Johnson within global government affairs and policy, based in Massachusetts, and my background is legal and policy for the last 20 years. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. I do also just want to acknowledge Dr. Stephanie Carrington, who has also joined the board, was unable to be with us today, but we'll welcome in February. She's a tenured associate professor at BU's Wheelock College of Education and Human Development, so we look forward to welcoming her to the February meeting. Welcome to everybody. The work ahead of us is really important, and I'd be remiss if I didn't just give one acknowledgement to the previous chair who sat in this seat, Dr. Noni Lasso, for the work that she did during this transition, during COVID, to really lay the foundation for us to hit the ground running in partnership with the new administration, in partnership with the new board members, to ensure that we are delivering on our promise to the children and families in the Commonwealth. And so just want one more special acknowledgement to her for her leadership. With that, I will turn it over to the Secretary. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. We are all looking forward to partnering with you as we endeavor on this important work, and want to turn it over to you to just offer a few opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yes.
Wonderful. I am, first, really sad that I'm not there. I can see everyone on the live stream. It's a full room and lots of energy, and very much looking forward to the next time that we come together, and sorry that I couldn't be there today. But I'm thrilled to be in the role and very much look forward to learning from you, the commissioner, my fellow board members, and most importantly, the providers and families in early education settings across the state. I thought I would focus my comments briefly in the direction of introduction, as this is my first EEC board meeting and day 4 in the role as secretary. In my previous role as superintendent, there was a consistent visiting of the question of why. Why do we do this work? What drives our passion and commitment? I think I'll start there. My why is wrapped in a moral imperative, a simple statement that I say that conveys a set of beliefs and a commitment, and it is this: education is the key driver toward equity. Equity of opportunity, equity of experience, equity of access. That is what drives me, pulls me out of bed each day, eager to work, to collaborate, to push in every way that I know how to ensure that each and every student has not only the opportunity to thrive, but has a pathway to realize his or her dreams. That why has been the foundation of professional experience, my professional experience over the past 22 years, first in the classroom as a high school history teacher in Boston, to leadership roles from principal to most recently a superintendent in Lynn. Over the next few weeks and months, I look forward to discussing the early education workforce, the subsidy regulations, C3 funding, and of course, making childcare affordable for all families in the Commonwealth, as Governor Healy announced in her remarks last Thursday. These are the early days in the Healy-Driscoll administration, and I'm jumping right in. In the weeks and months ahead, I'm eager to talk with people from across the Commonwealth's early education sector about priorities moving forward, including our family care providers, our program directors, educators, and support staff in our center-based programs, and our providers caring for children after school and out of school time. I also look forward to hearing from the passionate work of advocates and stakeholders supporting the field. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for those remarks, and I think we can all are all inspired by that why as well, and look forward to the work ahead. And I hope today's agenda, I hope for you and for the rest of the new board members, and even some of us that have been on for a little bit, helps to ground us in who we are and then how we get to our why. To address the number of things that you are. So I know the commissioner has a presentation today so we can spend some time grounding ourselves in who we are as a department, and then spend a little bit of time on one of the topics that you mentioned, which is the workforce and the role that we may play as a department in that conversation going forward. And so appreciate your remarks. We thank you for being here today. I know, and I appreciate you jumping in. This is day 4, and we are grateful for your presence here and your participation. And with that, I will turn it over to the commissioner for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to you in your new role as chairman. I want to thank you for being willing to take on this leadership opportunity and partnering with the agency at this time of great challenge and opportunity. And welcome, Mr. Secretary. We're looking forward to having you on the board and to your leadership in the educational sector in early ed and across the continuum. And welcome to our new board members. We have a board full of many new members, and I think it provides a real opportunity for us to be working together around the priorities with the new administration and those that we have been working towards for the last several years. So we did organize today's board meeting to be a little bit of a kickoff to the new year, the new board, the new administration, with a little bit of a level set. Who we are and what we do, kind of the scope of our work, a deep a little bit of a dive into some work around where childcare and early education sits in the broader economy and labor market, which is a really essential piece of the puzzle for us right now, and thinking about how essential our field is and we are in terms of economic recovery from the pandemic. And then highlight on one of our biggest challenges and pain points for the agency and for the sector right now around the early childhood workforce and the capacity issues in the field. So we look forward to digging into that agenda. A few exciting updates I have for you and a couple announcements. The first is, as we shared, the agency was awarded the Federal Preschool Development Grant. This is a 3-year grant, $12 million over 3 years each, so $36 million total, really dedicated to system building in the early education and care sector, which is a lot of what we've been talking about over the last year. So we expect these funds, which we are incredibly grateful for, to help really accelerate and push our work forward in several of the areas that the Secretary talked about and that we've been talking about. So whether it's making our child care financial assistance more equitable and accessible for families, building our credentialing system and professionalizing the workforce, bringing the voice of families into the work of the agency in a much more meaningful way. So things that have been on our list, but we expect to be able to accelerate through this grant. So I want to thank the team that worked on that grant and who are now working on it. I think we have already received our first allotment of funding, so getting work underway with trying to staff up and build the capacity to make sure we can deliver on that grant. The other exciting announcement I have is I shared with you last month that the agency was working on in the fiscal year 23 budget, the legislature appropriated $10 million for a pilot to provide childcare financial assistance to staff working in early education and care programs, really with the goal of recruitment and retention. So for families that are working in programs or interested in working in programs that have children of their own, financial assistance can be a really important way for them to be able to stay in a program or perhaps take a job they might not otherwise have been able to. So we are launching that pilot today. So the first set of information went out to our stakeholders, and we'll do a broad-based announcement to all of our licensed programs with a focus on those working with our subsidized families tomorrow. And just briefly for our audience and for the board members, that we are going to be running that pilot through our existing financial assistance system. So essentially creating immediate access or priority access for those staff who are working in early education and care out of school time programs. It's not limited to the teaching staff, it's for all staff in the program. So folks working in the food service part or in transportation or in support services, behavioral health, all the challenges we've heard from programs about staffing. We don't have a lot of insight into what the need is, but we wanted to launch it as quickly as possible so that we can understand what the scope is. So we're going to start with a pilot and start to gather information and begin to hopefully enroll families. We're going to be prioritizing staff that are at 85% of state median income or below, and we'll be running it through the Mass 211 and the Child Care Resource and Referral Agencies. So as I said, we'll have a new web page up tomorrow, link right from the EEC homepage, so you'll be able to find out information there. You can call Mass 211 if you want to get on the waiting list and get enrolled in the program. And we will also be sending out information and a flyer that folks will be able to distribute across the state. So we will be closely watching how this goes, what the scope of the need is, and reporting back to the board on a regular basis. Okay. I wanted to mention a couple upcoming board meeting topics. One, for February, we hope to be in Lawrence. Recognition of 2 board members hailing from Lawrence. And we'll be finalizing logistics for that, kind of keeping with our tradition of being in Boston 1 month and then out in the field, having a chance to hear from members of the early education and care sector. For our March board meeting, we're actually going to push that back one. It's currently scheduled for the 14th of March, and we'll be pushing that back to the 21st, and we'll make sure everyone has logistics for that. Lastly, just a couple quick personnel announcements. First, is Amanda Sakaguchi here? I thought I saw her. Oh, she is. I just want to introduce our new Chief Financial Officer. Amanda's been with the agency 6 years, and we're very happy that she has agreed to take on this new critical leadership role in the agency. So thank you, Amanda. You'll be hearing from her, no doubt. I'm also very happy to introduce Ellen Grandine, who's our new Associate Commissioner for Workforce Development. And I know you've been hearing us talk about that position and what a critical role it's going to play, including thinking about the agenda items that we're going to be talking about today, the major challenges that we're seeing in the workforce. Ellen joins us from Middlesex Community College, so deep knowledge of the community college and higher education field, as well as special education, early childhood education. So bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the team, and we're thrilled to have you. Finally, not here today, I don't think, but Janet Montoya, who is our new program specialist focusing on family child care, really reflecting the agency's commitment to elevating our family child care providers and focusing on the unique needs of that part of our sector in terms of building capacity and support. So we're thrilled she's joined us. She's a longstanding family child care provider, a coach, a teacher, and has the experience in the field to really help us design and work our programs in a way that meets the needs of family child care providers. So we'll look forward to introducing her when she's feeling better and able to be here. That concludes my update. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent, thank you. And on behalf of the board, I do want to welcome Amanda, Ellen, and Janet, and other members of the team that have joined us recently. It's exciting to walk around the office and see so many fresh faces and so many re-energized faces. Hopefully everyone had a little bit of time over the last couple of weeks to recharge as we embark on some really important work ahead of us. And so I want to extend a thank you to the team, especially as we think about one of the words that you mentioned in your remarks, which is opportunity. And when I think about the two pilots that you spoke about, the grant, the PDG grant, as well as the innovation pilot, I think that's really encapsulates what we need to focus on, which is the opportunities ahead of us to work to enhance our partnership and support of this critically important field. And so thank you to the team that sits behind you every single day for their work to get us to this point, and to the new members, we welcome you. At this point, we'll move to the public comment portion of the meeting. We have one public comment here, Patrick Stanton from the Mass After School Partnership. As Patrick joins us, I do want to just acknowledge to the board, you will have received prior to the meeting today additional public comment from Mansfield Children's Center regarding the importance of sustainable C3 funding. And I do also want to acknowledge that Patrick's organization submitted our formal testimony as well that was included in that packet. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Secretary Tutwiler, Commissioner Kershaw, Chairman, and members of the board. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. Really appreciate it. So my name is Patrick Stanton. I am the Executive Director of the Massachusetts After School Partnership, or MAP. And we are a statewide network dedicated of stakeholders dedicated to improving the lives of children and youth in underrepresented communities across Massachusetts. So today I am urging the board to focus on core challenges and opportunities for school-age programs across the Commonwealth. After-school programs are a key piece of the education ecosystem here in Mass and represent a significant portion of the total number of programs that benefit from EEC's voucher program. Thousands of families rely on these vouchers to ensure their kids have a safe place to engage in a high-quality learning experience outside of a traditional school hours. Research shows that students in these high-quality after-school programs do better academically and social and emotionally. Like many other parts of the educational ecosystem, school-age after-school programs are facing unique challenges as the Commonwealth continues to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. As the board begins their work in the new year, I want to encourage you to focus on these unique challenges so school-age youth and their families can access the best possible opportunities to them. The first issue is funding. After-school programs, especially those that serve high-need communities, have struggled financially because of the pandemic. Many are struggling to continue to provide voucher slots and keep tuition low. MAP urges the board to consider increasing reimbursements to programs to ensure they can maintain a high level of quality and access to these programs. The second issue is, of course, the workforce. The after-school workforce is facing a challenging time. Consisting of a broad range of backgrounds and work experience, the workforce has been substantially impacted and has led to increased wait lists across the state. MAP urges the board to include more relevant school-age professional development and seek out and incorporate workforce hiring and retention strategies being used by after-school programs across the state. The third issue is regulatory reform. The core strength of after-school and why the research has shown it to be such an effective tool is the ability to be flexible and meet the diverse needs of youth. The regulatory structure, as it stands now, has been built for early education. Many licensed after-school providers find the structure confusing, difficult to navigate, and limiting the ability to be flexible. EEC must create a new set of regulations specifically for school-age programs and their unique needs. EEC also must work more closely with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to align regulations and funding. MAP is excited to work with the board to help build these new systems and address the ongoing challenges of the after-school field. By beginning to implement these changes I've listed today, EEC can help support school-age programs and ensure children and youth have opportunities to rebound from the pandemic. I can answer any questions, but thank you so much for allowing me to testify today.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you to you and your organization and like organizations across the state for what you do for children in after-school programs. And we appreciate that. And again, just to reiterate, we do have a copy of this in our packet as well,
Yep.
so as a reference. So thank you.
Great, thanks.
Yep. That's all I had. Is there anyone else in the audience that was here for public comment? No? Great. We are going to move the routine business. We have one vote to do today on the minutes from the last meeting, but we're going to hold that until the end of the meeting, just based on quorum. We have an additional member joining us in a little bit. And so we will move to the broader agenda, which begins with the commissioner and the EEC overview.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, a chance to sort of talk a little bit about the scope of the agency, the basic sort of framework for who we are and what we do. The chair and I have been having an ongoing conversation about the role of the agency. And as we think about the enormous opportunities in this moment for early education and care and the challenges, I think the question the board will be talking about a lot over the next year, sort of what is the role for us in accelerating, influencing, funding, changing, leveraging what we have to make changes. And so starting with kind of an overview of where we are today for our existing board members and for our new members, kind of a quick overview of sort of what the agency does and how we're funded. So our vision is that children and youth reach their full potential and that we are part of creating the conditions for that happening, for our families, for our providers, for our programs, so that families in the Commonwealth can thrive academically, economically. We're going to talk more about how we do that as we get deeper in. So the agency was formed, I think about EEC a lot, and I think about the board, and we're sort of a youthful board, I was saying. New, many short tenured on the board, short tenure for the commissioner here today too. But the agency itself is also pretty young. So the agency was one of the first of its kind in the country, formed in 2005, based on the foundation. I really think Dr. Tutwiler on the idea that to provide equity and economic, academic opportunity and outcomes, that we needed to start earlier in the educational timeline for families and children. And so the foundation of this agency was really built on the idea that early education and care and child care, bringing together multiple programs from across different parts of state across different parts of state agencies and into a single agency. But the other thing that happened with the creation of the agency is that it was rooted in the educational foundation of the Commonwealth structure. So at the time that the agency was created, a new board and department of early education and care to sit with equal footing with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the Department and Board of Higher Education, forming a commitment by the state to the full cradle to career educational attainment. And I think we've really benefited in this state, and I meet with my colleagues from other states to have a single state agency that is dedicated to the education of our youngest learners, both in terms of how we organize our funding, our relationship to providers, and our ability to take sort of a statewide systemic approach. So we are overseen by an 11-member board and also have oversight from the Executive Office of Education, which oversees all 3 education agencies. We have 2 advisory councils. One focuses on our sort of family access part of our work, and then we have a workforce council that helps advise. Those each meet quarterly, and the board, as you're aware, or will be aware soon, meets 10 times a year by legislative mandate. We have a brand new organizational chart that we've been working to fill out over the last year, but here's who we are today, about 239 staff. spread across 7 different divisions. You can see the majority of our staff are our licensing team. So that's our group and school age, family child care, and residential and placement licensors who sit out in our field offices. We've also built a brand new family access and engagement team, lean and mean. It's 6 staff so far, but you'll see when we look at the funding chart that a pretty significant responsibility for a large piece of the work of the agency. And we also have a team that's dedicated to program supports and innovations. Brand new team around research and policy to elevate that set of functions within the agency and make sure that we're data-driven in our decision-making as much as possible. As I said, we have 6 offices throughout the Commonwealth, and this is not a typo. We have 5 regions numbered 1 through 6. And this is an area of opportunity this year for a little bit of organization. So we actually operate 5 regions from a licensing standpoint. We have 5 regional licensing offices. We have 6 regions for when we consider our subsidy rates. And so one of the things the agency is going to be working on is just sort of operationally organizing our regions and maybe having them numbered 1 through 5, because that's how many we have. The regional structure provides a very important way for us to stay connected to the community, stay connected to the field. And as you'll see, not only do we do licensing, but we also have a number of really important grant programs. And to be able to communicate and have a regional structure that supports programs and supports families is really essential. So actually organizing, I'm making a joke of it, but organizing our regions is actually a pretty important piece of making sure we have a functioning operational structure that those we serve can understand where they fit in and how to get the help they need from the agency. So overview of the things that the agency kind of generally does in our large buckets. So the first thing is the support directly to families, and we do that through child care financial assistance, tuition subsidies, scholarships that comes under a lot of different names, but it's help paying for child care so families can enroll, and we can help address affordability issues for them. We also work with families through our child care resource and referral agencies and community partners to help find access to early education and care programs or other resources that families might need. We were having a conversation earlier about what is the agency's role and responsibility relative to all families in the Commonwealth, and I think that's a really important question for us to be asking as we think about the broad range of services and funding that the agency has. A big piece of what we do is training and support for our educators, so that's direct professional development or professional development through our many awesome partners like our community colleges and our child care resource and referral agencies. We have traditionally done teacher certification, and we will be doing that again in terms of issuing certifications for various levels. As teachers increase their skill and certification levels, we issue certifications relative to those levels. And we also, in partnership with the Board and Department of Higher Education, scholarships to access higher education. Obviously, we have oversight and support, so that's our licensing, but it's also technical assistance and support. So in addition to sort of quality supports and funding to programs around behavioral health, we also provide, in collaboration with CDAC, the facilities support for programs, as well as a big piece of our work has been the Commonwealth Cares for Children program over the last 2 years, fortunately for us, to support programs. And then a lot of our work is in partnership with our other agencies. So I would say children being served by the Department of Children and Families, children being served by the Department of Transitional Assistance. They are kind of our clients, so we work with those agencies really closely, as well as the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and opportunities to better align our work around school age and out-of-school time programming exist for sure, and collaboration with the Board and Department of Higher Education around access to higher education as well. This is a little bit of EC by the numbers. This is intended to help understand sort of the scope and touch of the agency. So nearly 8,000 programs, and we're actually hoping that we'll have more as a result of some of the work we do. 8,000 programs operating across those regions. The license capacity reaches nearly 200,000 kids a day. As we'll talk about in the second half of the agenda, more than 200,000. That the staffed capacity of those programs is not operating at the current license capacity. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then our child care financial assistance. So we help more than 51,000 families access early education and care by helping subsidize the cost of those programs. And we are almost up to caseload numbers from pre-COVID, but we're still working on a lot of initiatives to make sure that system is as functioning and efficient and modern and responsive for families as possible, which we've spent a lot of time talking about over the last year. I'm not going to go into great detail, but I wanted to have a sense of the overall scope of our budget. Our operating budget in the current year is $1.3 billion, and which is a 28% increase over last year's funding level. In addition to the operating budget of 1.3, there's a brand new trust fund of $490 million that the legislature has created to support both high quality investments as well as affordability. And we'll be talking more this year about how to access and leverage those funds. But the overall budget includes, you can see, the predominant amount of funding is in our child care financial assistance or subsidy programs. We fund our staff and capacity across two different line items, our administrative staff and then our licensing staff. There are smaller programs that are dedicated to professional development, quality investments, and supports. As you all are aware, and I included in your materials that this is the FY23 budget, and the board did make recommendations in November for where they would like to see investments across these line items and in our different functions for FY24. This is what it looks like a little bit by funding source and by function. So you can see that the predominant source of our funding is federal. Although that has shifted a lot over the last several years to be much more balanced in terms of state appropriations. So the red is our state appropriations, and then you can see the trust fund there. So really making a significant contribution to the overall availability of funds for early education and care. And then by function, I think it's important to recognize too that, you know, the plurality of our budget is really in our subsidy funds or our child care financial assistance, which are predominantly federally funded with some matches from state. And then the Commonwealth Cares for Children, which is a new program that was invested in over the last several years, started with federal dollars, and this year funded, thankfully, with state funds. And you can see what a contribution that's making to the overall budget. And then again, the trust. And then our admin quality investments, and that includes our professional development, are a much smaller slice of the overall budget. This is what it looks like over the years. For many years, the agency was in the $500 to $600 million range, and I think reflecting again the recognition of the importance of early education and care, both in the midst of the pandemic and also as it relates to economic and pandemic recovery, increased investments being seen over the last several years, opportunities in the in the form of our funding chart as well. In 2020, this board, or the board at the time, I guess I should say, developed a strategic plan, a strategic action plan for 2020 to 2025. And as I've talked about with existing board members, it really has stood the test of time in terms of the overall pillars of that strategic action plan. So what are the goals and vision that we have for the children, youth, and families in the Commonwealth, our educators, our providers, and our investment in the state system to be able to deliver those outcomes across the other pillars. The strategic action plan also included a number of key metrics that we've been talking about refreshing and revisiting over time, but they are a mix of sort of operational and process measures in terms of how people experience the system, what the volume of the system is, and outcomes that we want in the long term, particularly as it relates to third grade reading, which we know is such a high predictor of later academic and school success. You all have seen this a couple times too. One of the things we've been working on over the last 9 months is how do we take that vision that was included in the strategic action plan and our thoughts about the metrics and the curves that we want to influence, and how do we operationalize that day to day. And the agency has really taken a human-centered design focus to think about our key users, our children, youth, and families, our providers, and our educators, to make sure that we are organized as an agency to address the user experiences of each of those groups, as well as able to deliver on the key priorities and initiatives that the agency has. So over the last 9 months, we focused a lot on our children, youth, and families, and a lot of discussions about the child care financial assistance and our subsidy system. A lot of focus on C3 and the importance of the stabilization grants and continuing those, and what the impact of that has been on both access for families. At the same time, and we've also been working, as you know, on our capacity and making sure we're able to deliver that, and hiring talent, some of which we saw today. At the same time, we've been sort of working on our theory of action around workforce. As we know, it's the biggest challenge facing the field. It's the biggest challenge facing the economy. I stole this from somebody, and I wish I knew who it was, but we are the workforce behind the workforce. And because of that, I think we have an essential role in thinking about how we help move the agenda around capacity issues and the challenges for the early education and care workforce. And that's a little bit of what we're going to focus on today after we hear from our special guests. Okay. I'm going to stop there. Go back to this for a second. So as I said, we have challenges across the field. We have opportunities across the field. I think the agency is well positioned with leadership here and with kind of an amazing staff to be able to make some significant progress. And we're going to look forward to working with the board to identify what those key opportunities are. Let me pause and see if there are questions, additional information that would be helpful about the scope and touch of the agency. On any given day, we're touching nearly 200,000 families with our licensed programs. 51,000 with our, so the scope is significant in terms of what we're able to do. And soon we'll have data on the number of educators in the field. That is something we've wanted for a long time.
I have a couple of maybe reflections and for the future, looking at this amazingly comprehensive set of slides. One is, it sounds like we will spend some time talking about the trust fund. I think that's an area I don't feel very clear on where it is and what the opportunity had. So that's maybe, it sounds like we're going to do that. So, I mean, the 28% increase in the budget, that doesn't even include this massive trust fund, like the opportunity that we have to influence and make change happen for all families in this country, in this state, is enormous. And so we're going to do that. Okay. Julie,
We are looking forward to those conversations, and also making sure, I think, as we understand sort of where there's opportunities for sort of one-time investments and where there's opportunity for ongoing investments, and how we best deploy the dollars that have been allocated to the agency with respect to sort of where those investments could have the largest impact.
Great. And then the second one was, I love this slide that explains that we've spent a lot of time in the youth and families and providers, and now we're focused on educators. And as I was looking at this slide and then recentering on if you go back to the metrics slide, what is that now? Wait, I just lost it. Priority outcomes and indicators from the strategic plan. I would love for us to look centrally at the children are on track to third grade success at some point. I think we use the word quality a lot, and we talk about the idea of workforce as a path to quality, and we haven't yet in my year and a half centered on that.
Yep.
Where are we now? What do we need to do? How does that, and I think with Dr. Tutwiler, the new secretary on board too, like thinking even more cohesively about the path to that from where we have the opportunity to influence would be a welcome conversation at some point.
and a really critical opportunity to align with our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And I think, quite frankly, we've been sort of focused on the capacity issues, which we'll talk about some of those big challenges. And you're absolutely right, that the board and the agency needs to continue to get back to sort of our theory of action around quality and outcomes for kids.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I'm sorry
Please.
if somebody else had their hand up, but one thing that we sort of asked about years ago that never happened because COVID did is an analysis of sort of like what are the aspects of quality and what kind of a investment do those things take, and so some kind of critical investigation. I know that we're going to be undertaking this sort of cost of care analysis. And we want to sort of, push for quality across the system. But what does that mean? And what are the elements of quality that provide, biggest bang for buck, right? Like, because we can't do everything. We can't give everybody everything. We can't afford to do that. Because we want to promote access. We want to make sure that we're providing as many spots as humanly possible. So some kind of an analysis somehow of what are the aspects of quality would be really something we'd love to dive into at some point.
Make sure that's on an agenda for this spring's set of board meetings.
Other comments, questions from the board? I will just comment, I thought this was very helpful. I hope new board members found it helpful just to get grounded in the work and in the opportunity, but I also, as a visual learner, even just looking at the increase in funding, the responsibility that comes with that. And it's exciting to get back kind of post-COVID to conversations about quality and outcomes as we think about ways to partner most effectively with the exemplary professionals in the field that are doing this work every single day on behalf of kids. And so thank you, Commissioner, for just sharing that overview with us and grounding us, I think, for exciting conversation in the year ahead.
Great. Thank you. I think we are scheduled for a quick break while we
We're going to do technology.
Okay, while we swap
switch.
out. All right, so a quick 10-minute break while we swap out technology, and then we'll be very excited to invite Ashley White from Mass Taxpayers Foundation to come share with us a little bit of a zoom out, right?
Back in 10. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we just switch over the technology here to welcome our special guest, who I will do in one moment. But just in the spirit of closing the circle, I do want to give a chance for 2 additional board members to just quickly introduce themselves who have joined us since our last round of introductions. And so, Nikki, I'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Nikki Ruiz de Lizarriaga. I'm the parent board member. I forget the representative. Yes, thank you. So I have a 1 and a 3-year-old who are in care at a wonderful family child care center in Everett. And in addition to that, I work for an organization called Economic Mobility Pathways, or MPATH, which provides direct services to around 1,400 low-income families a year here in the greater Boston area. And we also have a network of providers, many of whom are actually in the early education space across the country, reaching around 350,000 families that way. So in addition to sort of myself as a parent, I also like to think that I bring the perspective of all of the low-income families that I have worked with over the years as well, and very much include them in helping us to think about policy and things like that as well. So I've been on the board since 2019.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikki. Carolyn, if I can ask you to do a quick introduction.
Sure, thank you, Paul. My name is Carolyn Kane. I am the Executive Director of the Autism Commission, and I serve on the board as the designee of the Secretary of Health and Human Services. I have a child that's developmentally disabled. I've been an attorney for 28 years, and this is one of the roles that I serve through the Executive Office of Health and Human Services. Thank you.
Thank you for serving, Carolyn. Now we're going to switch a little bit. As the commissioner said, we're going to zoom out a little on kind of the workforce, and then we'll zoom in a little bit on the workforce behind the workforce. I like how you kind of mentioned that about the work and the role that we have. But I want to introduce Ashley White, Senior Policy Researcher for Mass Taxpayers Foundation. Ashley, on behalf of all of us, I want to thank Mass Taxpayers because I know you all have made this sector a priority in the work that you all are doing this year, whether it's regarding the workforce, the subsidy work analysis that you've been doing. It's been incredibly helpful to make sure that we are casting a wide net of advocacy as it relates to the opportunities ahead of us here in this sector. And so thank you to your team for leading this, and for you in particular as the lead researcher on this, for all the work that you've done on this. And we look forward to, again, having a conversation about the larger kind of labor market, and then kind of honing in a little bit on childcare. So we appreciate you being here today to spend some time with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Very nice introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Ashley White from MTF, and thank you, Commissioner, for having me, and Secretary and board members. Happy to be with you all this afternoon. As Paul mentioned, going to kind of zoom out a little bit, talk about the workforce in Massachusetts, some demographic trends that we're seeing, then drill down a little bit into kind of the childcare workforce, and how this all kind of connects to the work that we're doing. Is that right? So starting with just sort of the big picture Massachusetts workforce trends, I think the kind of big takeaway here is that some of those demographic trends that we're seeing in Massachusetts as it pertains to the workforce are troubling. We face a serious a growing shortage of workers that really kind of threatens the state's economic future. We've had, decades of low birth rates and sort of folks leaving the state, and those were kind of traditionally offset by international immigration, which kind of kept us able to kind of retain and recruit talent here. But COVID shutdowns and the kind of pandemic has really kind of changed the workforce landscape in Massachusetts, and I'm sure elsewhere in the country as well. And that has kind of reduced international migration, and also has allowed folks to kind of seek economic opportunities outside of the state that they perhaps weren't previously able to. And so we're really kind of at an important inflection point right now in terms of determining if we can kind of overcome these challenges and recruit and retain talent in Massachusetts. So I'm going to show two slides here just to kind of articulate what the workforce challenges are. And I think this graph is really trying to display kind of the workforce constraints that we have. So this is the kind of prime age working population in Massachusetts, age 20 to 64. As you can see, that peaked in 2018 and has sort of continued to fall in the years after. The latter half of this graph is projections, so important to just note that they are projected to fall another 180,000 folks by 2030. And so this means that there's less people for the available jobs that we have in Massachusetts. And that is evidenced by this graph, which shows that Massachusetts has over 2 available jobs for every unemployed person. And so that you can see the kind of trend over time, gradually increasing, obviously a drop in the pandemic, and then has kind of skyrocketed again. So this is just showing that there's a growing labor shortage in Massachusetts as workers are kind of exiting the labor force or moving to other places. So what's driving these shortages? As I kind of indicated at the beginning, we've got population growth slowing. We've got sort of an aging population in Massachusetts as well, a pretty high population of those over 65. And then we've got migration trends really kind of turning negative. Domestic migration is increasing while international migration is decreasing. And COVID has only really accelerated these trends. So going to dive in now a little bit further onto kind of what's behind these workforce shortages. So this is births, going way back. But as you can see, a steady kind of decline since 1990. And if that number of births from 1990-ish, 1991 stayed the same till 2021, we'd have 400,000 more residents in Massachusetts. So you can see the kind of lost opportunity, so to say, with births declining there. This kind of shows as I talked about earlier, right, we've got international migration has really kind of helped lessen the impact of outmigration, domestic outmigration, but state competition has also increased. And this is, I think, put on by the pandemic as remote work has kind of increased. People can go wherever they want to go to do the same work that they were doing before. And so you can see Massachusetts has lost 46,000 residents in 2021, and that was the 4th most in the country. And so previously, I think the New England states were also in the same boat as us of losing population. And I think in the pandemic that trend has shifted. And now we are competing with Maine, we're competing with Connecticut and New Hampshire in ways that we were not before. And so Massachusetts is a bit of an outlier in terms of other New England states experiencing kind of out-migration. This is showing basically how that international migration is no longer offsetting that domestic out-migration. And so again, previously compensated for that low birth rate, compensated for the out-migration with international migration. I think since the pandemic, that has really kind of plummeted. And so you can see in this graph that the blue bar there is kind of the domestic out-migration is far exceeding the talent that we're able to kind of bring in internationally. And then last slide here before I go more specifically into kind of childcare. So those graphs are really kind of about the current workforce, right? Who do we have now? What talent do we have to fill the open jobs? I think this slide is really about the workforce of the future and how are we kind of grooming, so to say, and educating folks to stay in Massachusetts and work in Massachusetts long term. And you can see in this graph that enrollment in a variety of different education settings is also declining. So something to keep in mind moving forward as well. So just going to quickly share two graphs on the childcare workforce. I know you all are collecting data on this, probably have more relevant data to Massachusetts, but thought it would be important to basically share that the kind of workforce shortages that we're seeing at large are, the childcare workforce is no, I think, exception to that, as we've talked about many times before. And so this is nationally the percent change in employment. And I think the takeaway here is just that the childcare workforce nationally has not recovered at the same rate that the sort of economy at large or the workforce at large has. And we see this trend play out in Massachusetts as well. So this is the same sort of equation here, but in Massachusetts, that yellow line is sort of the childcare industry with private employment being the blue line. And so we've lost, I think there's sort of competing data on this, but roughly 3,000 childcare workers since the pandemic. And again, I think this follows national trends in terms of the childcare workforce not exactly recovering at the same pace as jobs in other sectors. So kind of pivoting here, we have these workforce challenges. We've got a workforce shortage. We need to kind of prepare for that. Well, childcare can absolutely be a solution to some of those challenges. But childcare also has its own workforce issues. Our subsidy system is relatively limited. We've got high costs in the private system. And we've got supply issues sort of at large as well. Certainly not Massachusetts only that is dealing with this. And so MTF decided to look at what does it cost our economy to have inadequate childcare, to not have enough childcare to kind of fill the need across the state. And so we basically estimated the economic impact in Massachusetts of that. And fortunately for us, there were a lot of smart people who came before us, and there was a framework for our research. But just to give folks kind of a high-level understanding of how we did this, there is survey data collected about kind of who's leaving the workforce, who's missing work, parents missing work because of childcare issues. And we took that data and we estimated the sort of population in Massachusetts of sort of working parents and applied that data to that estimated population and then used sort of wage and tax data to get sort of a dollar figure based on that impact. We used data from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So they had 9 different state surveys that ask a variety of questions, like I said before, about how are you impacted by sort of the lack of childcare in terms of your job or career. We chose that because it was sort of the largest sample of survey data, and we felt like it was the most thorough sample. But we also took methodology from the University of Nebraska, who had done a similar state study, and we also gut-checked our kind of results with a Ready Nation report that had done similar things, just to give folks an idea of how we went about that. So this is what our estimate found, that Massachusetts, because of inadequate childcare, loses about $2.7 billion each year, and that's across families and businesses and also taxpayers. And so cost of families was the biggest bucket here at $1.7 billion, with businesses and foregone tax revenue behind that. So just deeper dive on the family impact. So lost wages, that's like hourly workers who miss work and aren't paid when they don't go to work, right? Does not include salaried workers who we assumed kind of are paid, even have paid vacation time or paid days off. And then we also incorporated lost wages from parents potentially going from a full-time job to a part-time job because they're just not able to kind of manage the childcare responsibilities with that full-time position, and that was at 1.2 billion. The lost workers one is a bit unknown. So that's folks who left the workforce entirely and said, I can no longer, it doesn't make financial sense for me because childcare is so expensive, or I can't sort of manage this anymore, and they left the workforce altogether. We decided not to incorporate that into our estimate because it's a really hard thing to accurately collect. What is the sort of cost benefit of losing your salary but also not paying for childcare anymore? And so we decided to err on kind of the side of conservatism, and we left that out. But that also means that this is likely, right, not incorporating the whole impact here. And then moving to business impacts, the biggest things here were turnover costs, right? So when a worker leaves the workforce altogether, we didn't calculate sort of their lost wages, but we did calculate what is that to the business, right, in having to retrain or rehire workers, and that was about $560 million. And then there's replacement costs. So when an hourly worker misses a day of work, that employer has to replace that worker, typically at an overtime wage, and that increases costs for businesses as well, and that was at $228 million. And then, as I mentioned previously, didn't calculate sort of lost wages for salaried worker, but did incorporate the fact that if a salaried worker has to take time off or leaves work, that is lost productivity on behalf of the employer, and so that was the 21 million there. So that sort of wraps up the presentation here. Hopefully that was helpful in kind of setting the workforce context in Massachusetts and sort of helping folks understand why this work is so important and the connection to the economy. And looking forward to working with you all and improving that system to make sure that folks have more access and we can meet those workforce challenges ahead. Happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. And just a comment, we have a lot of conversation ahead of us regarding the role that we play in making sure that we're supporting the field as it relates to the workforce needs that are out there. And I think the context and some of the data points you've shared in this presentation, even around college enrollment numbers, like there are just some competing forces out there that we need to be aware of as we think about the right strategies and the right opportunities ahead of us to meet those needs and the role that we want to play in that space. And so from a very macro level, I appreciate kind of the context that you've said about just what the landscape looks like and to allow us to then kind of narrow in a little bit.
Yeah.
And with that, I'll open it up to the board for any questions, comments.
I mean, I thank you again, Ashley, and we appreciate your partnership. You add a whole nother level of knowledge and capacity around early education and care. So things we can't do inside the agency. And so when our partners do this kind of in-depth analysis and like the work you're doing on the subsidy work, I think it advances our work in a really quality way. So thank you for that. I think the thing that struck me so much, and one of the reasons I think we wanted to bring this for the board's consideration, is just the sort of double impact, right? So when we look at the challenges that all businesses are facing, they're very much reflected, and we're about to see this in our own data, in like the childcare business experience, like too much turnover, people leaving for other things, wanting more flexibility, those kinds of things. But when our childcare field is experiencing it, it ripples into the broader economy. And so that is sort of the broader context and question.
Should be the solution to the workforce challenges.
I hope that message got across. I think there's enormous opportunity here, and childcare plays a really direct role with sort of economic opportunity for childcare providers, but also the economy at large. And so, again, looking forward to partnering with you all and working through some of the challenges to make sure that we're meeting those needs and what's ahead.
Nikki?
Do we have any data on the percentage of women with children under age 5 who have left the workforce? I know that like across the country, we sort of saw during COVID, millions of women leaving the workforce. And I would just be interested, for the sake of this board, looking specifically at, those with young children, because that, anecdotally, it's like, yes, it happened.
The figure that I've seen has been sort of children under 18, but would be curious to see, if they have something more specific that I think relates to this work. But that figure, I think, similar to, the trends that we're seeing in terms of childcare workforce not recovering like the workforce at large. I think we see women not re-entering the workforce to the same numbers that men are. And so, but yeah, I think important to, moving forward, to kind of incorporate those types of trends. So.
More? Oh.
Yeah, so first of all, very helpful information, so thank you. Just wondering how widely you've shared this data with business community, what the response has been, because, I mean, the numbers are staggering, and the problem will just compound itself if we don't get ahead of it. So just wondering what's the reaction been, and what action has the business community said they'd like to take?
Yeah, well, so on the sort of first half of the presentation, all the credit goes to my colleague Andy Bagley, who did sort of the workforce demographic trends, and that was released in the last few months, and I think has gotten some good attention and engagement from the employer community. And I would say same for, I think, this presentation. I know folks like Tom Weber, who is the executive director of the Massachusetts Business Coalition for Early Education and Care, was interested in this work, and we have shared it with his members, and they have certainly an engaged group of folks who are looking forward to contributing to this issue.
This is amazing information, thank you. The slide that showed just how big of a decline in migration of internationally, I'm curious, I guess a little bit, I wonder if you could give a little bit more color, both about like how that's come down so dramatically, the immigration data, and whether there's any reason to believe that that might change.
Yeah, well, I think there was perhaps some policy choices at the federal level that started that trend pre-pandemic, and then I think the pandemic really kind of, increased that issue. So I think the question too before us is, especially with international migration, what's going to happen in the years to come after we continue to kind of recover from the pandemic. But I think certainly don't want to kind of sit back on our laurels and say, oh, it's a blip, right? And make that assumption. And so I think our work moving forward is really about, I think we plan to sort of do this demographic work annually to kind of assess where Massachusetts is, what are the trends moving forward. But I think the pandemic really kind of spurred a trend that was already sort of happening, or exacerbated a trend that was happening.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Ashley, thank you. This is a big topic, right? And I know we just did a quick overview here, but I really do believe it sets the table for our conversation ahead of us over the next couple of months about the levers that we can pull within the department and as a board to help support the providers in our network. And so grateful for the leadership of MTF and the work you're doing in this space, and the data is very helpful as we think about making some decisions. And so thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ashley. Sorry, one more, and someday we'll get our slide, structure aligned, and then we won't have to take a break. But quick 5-minute break.
Yeah, we just did a quick technology shift.
Quick
5
technology
minutes.
shift. Yeah, sorry.
And welcome us back as we zoomed out a little bit. I think now we'll zoom in a little bit. And again, I just want to just reemphasize the context in which I think the thought process behind today's conversation is really about the conversation that we have ahead of us, right? And making sure that the board is well versed in kind of the data and the demographics, not only that are happening statewide across the workforce landscape, but now even a little bit closer to home, a little bit in the early education space. And so I want to thank our presenters here, Amy and Adrian, for the work that you've been doing as it relates to the workforce. And I know Sarah has been active in this as well as a number of others behind you who have really put your head down to really understand what's happening in the field, and grateful for your leadership. And we'll turn it over to the commissioner to just kind of tee this up and engage in a conversation.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. So welcome Amy Checkaway, Senior Associate Commissioner for Research Data Analytics, and our Director of Research, Adrian Murphy. So as the chair said, I think we wanted to root the board in sort of like, what does the agency do? What are our responsibilities? What are our spheres of influence? Where is our funding? Where are our opportunities? And then situate sort of the field and the sector in the broader sort of economic picture. And given that clearly the workforce issues are one of the biggest challenges now, we're going to share a little bit of data about what we know about the early education and care workforce. Like I said, a lot of the trends do reflect the overall labor market trends for employers and for employees. And then we have had a board working group focused on this topic around workforce challenges meeting since September. And so after we share the sort of grim picture of the data, although there's some bright spots as well that they'll share. Then we're going to share just a little bit about what the strategy is that the board and the agency has been taking to think about where we might have some positive influence and leverage. And I think we'll go deeper into that for the February meeting as well. And we've been very fortunate to have Maria Muller chairing our workforce working group. So after we've heard the data presentation, we'll turn it to Maria to provide an update on sort of where we are on strategy and theory of action and change. So, Amy and Adrian, thank you.
Thank you so much. Just as a bit of context, for those of you who were present in December, we presented quite a bit of data to the board, which prompted some really good discussion about the capacity of the system currently, about staffing, about compensation. And also, we were specifically focused last month on how programs are investing their C3 Commonwealth Cares for Children funds and the impact of those resources. So this month is a bit of a review and really intends to present a smaller number of key data points that seem particularly relevant to opportunities and challenges, both for the system as a whole and more specifically for the workforce. So some of the data will look familiar to some of you, but we wanted to make sure everybody had a good grounding in some of what we know right now. So the commissioner shared earlier the number of licensed providers and licensed capacity by region across the Commonwealth. And this is a metric we track regularly in order to really understand how many kids the system can serve and how our system as a whole is expanding or contracting over time. Just to define what licensed capacity means, it's the maximum number of children that a program is allowed to care for at any one time. And as we'll talk about in a bit and was already mentioned, it's not the same thing necessarily as staffed capacity. So the number of licensed programs shown here on this graph really shows us that overall, the number of programs has continued to increase over the past 2.5 years since the pandemic shutdown. Although it is still smaller, and again, on the graph is the number of programs than it was prior to the pandemic. It's interesting to see that the number of group and school age or center-based programs has essentially returned in terms of numbers to pre-pandemic levels, while the number of family childcare or home-based licensed providers has not yet. When we translate the number of programs into the number of overall child seats, we see that the overall licensed capacity is about 3,500 seats lower, which is about 1.5% lower compared to the immediate pre-pandemic period. And again, group and school-age center-based capacity has really returned in terms of number of seats to the levels immediately before the pandemic, while family childcare capacity remains below pre-pandemic levels by about 3,400, 3,500 seats. Although the number and capacity of family childcare providers or home-based providers has declined, some hopeful news is that the monthly rate of new family childcare providers is higher than it was immediately before the pandemic, and you can see it's continuing to increase. Almost all of the new family childcare providers who have opened since the spring are still open, which is good news. And new family childcare capacity, if we're just looking at the number of new programs, since March equates to almost 6,000 children in terms of how many kids are able to be served by those new programs. We do also know that family childcare homes, just as group and school age programs some do close every month. So when closures are also factored in since March, in total we have about 100 new family childcare programs. I'll also note that the rate of closures, which we've been looking at carefully since March, is the lowest that it has been of any of the time periods that's covered on this graph. So
again, that is some good news, and I know we'll be talking in a little bit about some strategies to further support the family child care part of the sector.
We should probably pause for just a second and do a quick explanation of family child care. Right, so like when we say group and school age, I tried to do like a look at all of the acronyms that we use. So when we talk about group and school age, the group programs are generally our center-based licensed programs, which you would traditionally think of as kind of a storefront operation where you would have a classroom with several teachers in it. And that might be an after-school program that's serving kids between 5 and 12 years of age. Sometimes in a school, sometimes in a community-based setting, or an early childhood program that's serving preschool or infants and toddlers in a center-based. A family child care provider is a home-based provider that serves between 6 and 10 children within their home. They are licensed and meet very strict licensing standards, and we monitor them the same way we do our center-based program. So, but family child care, one of the reasons I think we've been focusing on it so much is just in this sort of pre-pandemic world where families are working more from home and might want a smaller setting for their kids. In this environment, it seems like family child care is a great opportunity for us to kind of build capacity while also building economic opportunity and businesses within communities, particularly women-owned businesses, often women of color. So it's part of this hope and interest in family child care gives us an opportunity to really focus on sort of building that sector, and you'll hear a little bit more about that from Maria. But I wanted to make sure everyone was sort of on the same page about what a family child care provider is.
So, as was said before, licensed capacity is not the same thing as staffed capacity. And when we surveyed group and school age programs this past fall through our C3 mechanism and had a very good response rate to that about if they were able to actually serve their full licensed capacity, about a third of programs said that they are not, which is a little bit higher than the last time we surveyed programs in the spring. The most frequent reason for not being able to serve their full capacity continues to be unfilled staff openings. So almost a third of programs reported this as a major barrier. We also asked these programs how many more kids that they would be able to serve if they were at their fully staffed capacity, and they reported between 10 and 15,000 more children, which is a significant number. We know that more than half of group and school age programs report at least one open educator position. And of all of the programs that responded to our survey, the average number of openings as of this fall was between 3 and 4 positions that folks are looking for in order to fill open spots in classrooms. So in total, we are estimating, according to our survey, that there are over 2,000 open teacher positions across the Commonwealth and almost 4,000 open positions overall, which means that about 10% of all positions statewide of these roles are currently unfilled, with, again, teachers making up the majority of the openings, according to our data. And I'm going to turn it to Adrienne to talk a bit more about few other topics.
Great, thanks, Amy. Yep. So our same C3 survey this past fall also gave us some insight into educator turnover in the field, and we can see that about a third of educator positions have turned over in the last year. That number is pretty consistent geographically across regions, although it is higher among providers who serve a larger percentage of children receiving subsidies. And we looked at this with the board in the fall, and I think one of the questions that came up was doing some benchmarking, both across to other states as well as to other sectors, and we're working on that both in comparison to the K-12 sector here in Massachusetts as well as across other states nationally. The C3 grants have also given us an opportunity to collect more data around educator compensation, and you can see here that educator pay by role continues to increase over time from the start of the C3 grants through the present, although it still remains low. And I know that returning board members have seen this similar graph many times, but for folks who are new, we asked providers about their lowest and highest paid individuals by role, and then we calculate this gray midpoint between a program's highest and lowest paid educator by role that help give us a sense, both of that help give us a sense of the spread across the Commonwealth. And I'll say that there are also some slides in the appendix that have some further breakdowns of this by region as well as by subsidy acceptance as well. I think by sort of helpful for context, if you look at that midpoint of the educator pay, that equates to an FTE annual salary of about $42,000 a year, which is below 50% of SMI for a single parent family of 2. So I think that speaks to the dollars we're looking at here. We also had an opportunity through the C3 grant process to ask providers some questions about where educators who are leaving their programs are going. And the most frequent response is that providers report that the educators leaving their programs are leaving for a position outside of licensed early education and care and the public school system entirely, with leaving for the public school system being the second most common response. I think one of the things that's particularly interesting is the 20% that decided to stay at home or not work for now, and that's in addition to or separate from the 8% that are retiring, as we saw the demographic trends about the age of the workforce in Massachusetts. And then lastly, the grant gave us an opportunity to look at strategies that programs are using to recruit and retain staff. And here are the results that program of the question around the strategies programs are using to retain staff. You can see the most frequent or most commonly reported strategy is increasing salaries. But there are also a number of fiscal incentives here. Think about providing more flexibility, and then also providing new benefits. So while the most common response is that providers are looking to increase staff salaries to retain staff, there are both fiscal and non-fiscal incentives or strategies that providers are using. I think that, Commissioner, I'll turn it back to you now around some of the workforce strategies.
Thank you both very much. Any questions on the?
I have one
please.
just on the last slide, if you wouldn't mind, the third statistic there. Does that include something like tuition reimbursement or some kind of financial incentive tied to education for the employee/student?
The third. Got it.
I'm sorry, the provide one-time payments. The second, to retain.
Yeah, I don't know if we asked.
Yeah, I think that is primarily like one-time bonuses, either for retention or for hiring. You can see further down that there are also supports being provided for higher education. That was a slightly smaller percent, but I think those are two separate categories.
Okay, has there ever been something like a tuition reimbursement or tuition incentive for either high school or community college or college-age students as a way to kind of create a pipeline, alleviate the burden of the financial costs, and actually incentivize them to pursue it as a career? Has there been something like that?
I would say yes and maybe not quite as clearly articulated as the way you did. So we have a higher education scholarship program, somewhat underutilized, a little bit hard to access. I think it's going to be a focus of our work over the next year to figure out how to make it be more of that.
Okay.
And then certainly I think some of the programs have used these funds over the last year to help, and probably the providers have, but I think linking those two things, the entrance into the field and the supported incentives to stay, is something that needs to be more intentional than it has been in the way it's been implemented in the past.
Okay.
Great question.
Thank you.
We also have a grant program that partners with community colleges to help support students to attain degrees. So it's a third.
Got it.
But I think the employer linkage is something that we're really interested in trying to build out this year, so that people are getting paid while they're coming into the field and working, and also able to advance their skills and educational attainment as part of an employment sort of strategy. I think it's been sort of individual focused in terms of scholarships, and they can access it, and we might be reimbursing it either through the school or individually. But the employer sector-based strategy feels like one that we can sort of, there's a lever there we haven't pressed as much as we could.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I just have a comment and a question. Number one, that slide that George just referenced, I think just continues to emphasize the importance of C3 and a sustainable funding structure so that people can use those dollars in a sustainable way versus kind of one time, even if that works, but more to put towards salary. So as we think about the levers that we can pull going forward in this space, just want to amplify that. The second question is on slide, I guess, 24. Just as we think about the education system as a whole, right? So if we're looking at education as 0 to 12, 0 to 16, not EEC, DESE, higher ed, it's some continuity, just so that we understand the landscape in which we're operating in. The first two, it looks like there's a description in there that people left a position in another sector outside of licensed early child care or the public school system. And then the second one says left for public school system. So I'm just curious, like, to really understand, how we're serving the children of the Commonwealth and the movement between different age groups and just making sure we're clear and understanding that as we think about maybe even some macro efforts to kind of address some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So is there some combination there? Like, can you, do you know what I mean? Like it looks like it's like double counted.
Yeah, so the first is it's left for a position outside of licensed early education and care or public schools. So it's
Or
everything
public schools.
outside of.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, I
and
just
then
wanted
the
to make
second
clarify. Okay,
is
got
left
it.
for a position
Okay,
in the
all
public
right.
school system. But,
Okay.
but I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think your point about the lever of thinking about career pathways inclusive of the early education, K through 12, and higher education systems is something we haven't explored as much as we should. I think there has often been sort of a sense of competition, between or among, versus thinking about a pathway that might support educators and support, entrance into the field and then longer term growth and career pathways. So yet another opportunity.
I just think we've got a pool of professionals and providers that are committed to serving the children of the Commonwealth in some aspect, right? And so if we look at the education field from a 0 to 12, 0 to 16 lens versus kind of continuing to slice them, we might be able to think about this work a little bit differently and how we allocate some resources to address compensation and all of those things. So, thank you.
Thank you both. So we would now was going to ask if Maria would sort of step in and share a little bit with board members. You've heard pieces of this. It's developing and moving, thankfully, over the months. To talk a little bit about our strategic focus around workforce and sort of what we're thinking about in the long run and also in the immediate term.
Right, and this is a work, I will start by saying that this is a work in progress, and, there are things that we haven't pushed hard enough, so we definitely will continue to develop more strategies and be more inclusive with the strategies. But, so EECE is working in two different efforts to address the current system needs, right? More higher level or long-term. On the left side, it looks like a cycle, the components of that cycle, with the purpose of building a robust professional opportunities and career pathways for educators. It's, have clear, compelling career pathways, access to higher education and preparation programs, workforce, which should lead to a workforce pipeline and more educator recruitment, which should lead in turn to stable employment and hopefully drive more competitive salaries. Each component of this cycle has current challenges, and so addressing those challenges at a closer, lower level and more immediate level, actually, the department is taking some steps to address those. One of them is, the most obvious one is establishing clear pathways into the field, which, the immediate need is really for family child care educators, for capacity in the field, and for lower turnover. So that's obviously number one, and that includes recruiting family child care providers into the field, and also supporting and expanding the new pipeline strategies that are actually in the field right now outside of the department. And I especially appreciate this strategy because it reflects the new mindset of the department of collaboration and giving equal voice to the field, and just thinking of creative things together. So I really I am very appreciative that they are looking at what are the programs doing in the field to survive this crisis. And they're looking for ways to support that and hopefully expand those efforts. The other strategy is the child care financial assistance or subsidies for staff working in early childhood education, which we talked about and is being implemented as we speak. And the outreach campaign that we discussed in previous meetings as well, and hopefully to connect new educators into the field for employment opportunities, and then promote the professional learning across the field in general. I will recognize missing here is school age strategies, strategies specific to school age, and but I do want to also acknowledge that it will be included in the discussion for or in the agenda for our next meeting. So it does need. They have some specific challenges at the school age level that we definitely need to focus on as well. Just like family childcare, it requires specific strategies as well, separate from center-based programs. I think there's also an opportunity for the department to identify what creative practices are out there that out-of-school time programs are having out there just to survive as we speak. So I'm sure we can find ways to expand and just like we're doing for center-based, to expand on those strategies and continue collaborating with DESE and the district schools and obviously regulations development.
So, Muriel, I just wanted to just, so you may not be able to tell by the language that we have here because it's very internal to kind of our field, but George, this second bullet around the new pipeline strategies is really reflective of what you were saying, which is trying to specifically connect recruitment of folks into the field and then providing that support to get them to stay in the field. So we've been talking about apprenticeships and mentorship programs, employer-based, which would include providing scholarships or to keep people working in the field and to have them stay in the field as they gain new levels of skills and opportunities, yeah.
So for the next slide, the expected outcomes is, which I already touched on a little bit, the immediate outcomes will hopefully be increased capacity for family childcare and for center-based programs. That's what we all need right now. And reduce educator turnover. I mean, I think we just heard about what turnover was during the pandemic, and we consistently hear how that impacts turnover interrupts really learning and social emotional development on children. So we just want to make sure that we address that as soon as possible as well, and that will have long-term impact on especially social emotional development, which is really a priority that most programs in the field have right now with regards to the impact the pandemic had on children and families. The next outcome would be about quality. Obviously, we are going to see increased professional skills as demonstrated by educators' achievement of higher certification and credentialing levels, and that will also lead to higher number of certified educators in the field. So, it really is all about the immediate need that we have for educators and to come into the field, but also to stay in the field. I will also add that, which is one of my thoughts as a board member, actually, in one of the presentations, that a high percentage of educators in the field are brand new right now, just because of all these pipelines being built, and the efforts of the department to enter new people into the field. So we are going to have to think about ways to support those new educators to make sure that they remain in the field, but also get the health and safety training that they need.
Certainly links back more onto your comments about sort of quality, and if our first focus has been really around workforce as a quality input to the programs, I think the support for the brand new educators in the field and what skills and support we're giving them, not just to stay in the field, but to have the skills they need to work into the classrooms to get those outcomes that we want educationally for kids in the long run. So I think an important focus for us over the next several months as well. I think we've been sort of focused on we need humans, And now we really want to focus on what's the support they need to be successful for their own professional development, but for in the context of the programs and the kids as well.
Are we opening to comments?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Just riffing from where you're going. So first, I really appreciate this expected outcome slide. And in particular, I mean, the top three are essentially what we're trying to accomplish in the face of all this data that we are now looking at about what's challenging. And so to see like bullet one is growth in FCC capacity to pre-pandemic levels. Essentially, we're trying to get back those 3,500 seats we lost, right? So that one is particularly great because it's sort of connecting the dots to the data we've collected with the metric to say, this bullet is for 3,500 seats. And so if, I guess it would be great if for bullets 2 and 3, we could put the so what or the to what end, or, you know, like if we're gonna, what I'm grappling with is, so if we have 1/3 educator turnover per year data, what's a realistic sort of intersection of ambitious and realistic that things we're gonna do will move that to maybe 25% from 1/3 in a year? And so we gotta be honest about it, eyes wide open, just about all the data of how hard this is gonna be. But if we could put our best shot in these first 3 bullets in particular on the like, to what end, based on the data we're seeing, that would be amazing. And then the last 2 I love are the start of almost separate quality indicators. This is like I don't know if it's bring back the QRIS or, you know, a quality strategy. And so excited to both see that sitting in with the workforce system, but also maybe the start of what is a kind of the comprehensive look at how to strengthen quality that could also include the program content itself and other strategies as we started talking about.
Nikki?
Yeah, and just to add to that, I like the expected outcomes as well. And the only thing I would add is just sort of centering equity in it as well, and saying like, okay, so where is this growth happening? Because I think that especially with the center-based programs, we've seen, you know, increasing numbers of, private companies moving into that field, which is, you know, fine and great. I have nothing against that, but want to make sure that, you know, they tend to open up in higher income areas. And so if that's where the growth is, then, you know, wanting to make sure that we are also seeing growth elsewhere as well. And so really wanting to center the communities that have typically, you know, been a big part of the childcare workforce, which is, you know, women of color, and making sure that, you know, they're centered in all of this as well.
Yes.
I think a lot of the apprenticeships that are having, the mentor-mentee programs that we're having in the state are mostly women that are like immigrants or women, second language learners, or, you know, we are going to have good numbers. It'd be nice and interesting to track those numbers, but I'm thinking that that's going to be the majority of that is going to be, you know, minorities.
But I think, Nikki, what you're saying too, and Maria, that a statewide number is not going to give us the picture, right? We need regional data, we need localized data, we need demographic data to the extent that we can have it so that we understand, or that we're targeting our strategies in the communities where the need is greatest.
Yeah, and so that when we say growth, like not all growth is created equal, right? Because we're ultimately looking to increase capacity to serve kids with subsidies, hopefully, right? Well, that's my personal feeling.
Of course, yes. And then to build on that, I mean, maybe, I know this is expected outcomes tied to the workforce strand, but it could be that there is a galvanizing outcome that we have connected to low-income families and children as an objective that is about workforce measures with the subsidy work. Like, there's something that is about an equity-centered goal that should sit in here, but also, I don't know, I mean, we're missing that as both in here and as just sort of a way to center our work overall.
I mean, we probably should be reflecting this better, but I mean, it's clear to me as we do our, you know, that, and we looked at the salary data, that our early educators are low-income workers. And so we have an economic mobility strategy that's about our families, but an economic mobility strategy that's also about the workforce, whether they're family child care providers or those who are working in our center-based programs. And we should probably be reflecting that more here, in the sense that if we are part of the reason to make sure there's good salaries is to keep classrooms open, but part of the reason we want good salaries and access to higher education is so our staff can move on their own economic mobility path. So I think we can reflect that better too in terms of the commitment to equity for the workforce as well as for families.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's it. I think we, I don't, if there's other questions or comments from board members, there's a number of slides in the appendix, including I meant to mention when we talked about the structure of the agency, there is a list of responsibilities for board members that the chair asked us to include, and then a little bit, oh no, just that, and a little bit of other data. Yes. Where we got the data and additional sort of workforce data for your reference. But that concludes the formal agenda for the meeting today.
We have one
Oh,
piece of
right.
business, but I just want to say thank you. I remain optimistic, ending where we started with you describing how we were one of the first departments in the nation to be developed. Let's aspire to be the first in the nation to figure out how to support our workforce and continue to be the leader in this space. And knowing the talent in this room and the partnerships across the field, confident that we can get there. And so this will be a big conversation this year. I hope people found it helpful to just ground us in this as we look forward. So. One piece of business, vote on the minutes from the December meeting. I know there's a number of new members here who were not at the December meeting, and so when I call your name, if you just want to abstain from voting, that would be helpful. But I did want to just present the minutes from the December 13th, 2022 board meeting, which was held at the State House, and ask if there are any additions, corrections, or edits to those minutes. If no, make the motion to approve the minutes of the December 13th, 2022 board meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
Nikki, second, thank you. And I will call all the members. Linda,
Abstain.
Nikki Ruiz,
Yes.
Maura Siegel,
Yes.
Jamela Lee,
Yes.
Maria Moeller,
Yes.
Cheryl Travers,
Abstain.
George
Atanesov.
Atanesov. I got it now.
Abstain.
Awesome. Carolyn Kane,
Yeah.
Dr. Tutwiler.
Abstain.
Great. Thank you. The motion has passed. That does conclude our formal agenda, and I am going to end again where we began with just a welcome to the secretary, to the new board members, and just thank you for your service. There's no doubt that children and families and providers across the Commonwealth will benefit from all of your voices and perspectives at the table here, and we're really excited to get to work. I was talking with the secretary last week about the hunger we all have to kind of partner on so many of the opportunities ahead of us, and I know myself speaking, still being fairly new, I've got that hunger, and on behalf of the children in this Commonwealth, and so we really look forward to the work and look forward to hopefully being up in Lawrence in February on a little field trip. So with that, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.